Hello everyone, we are all back into the classes of social science after a long time. We had our examinations and all of you have done very well for your exams. Anyway, let us resume our chapters. Today, we will be shifting our classes to a new textbook, new subject. This is the third book of social science. This is our past 2. This is a history book, so from today onwards, we will be dealing with history. Have you ever thought of the need to study history? Why should we study history? History is already over now. History is over and we are living in the present, looking to the future. So what is the need to study history? Should we study history? Yes, we should study history. We should know how our past was. We had our ancestors and we should know how they lived. Then only we can trace our human history. Then only we can understand our history. So we should understand or we should learn what happened in the past. So let us start with the first chapter today. Chapter 1, Tracing Changes Through 1,000 Years. Let us have a glance at this chapter. This chapter is an intro to the whole textbook. We are learning our past too. So this chapter, the first chapter, is an introduction to the whole textbook. We will be studying the happenings, the events that happened from the years 700 to 1750, Common Era. CE is Common Era. Common Era means AD. We are living in 2021 Common Era. So we will be studying the happenings in between the years 700 and 1750 Common Era. That means 1000 years, about 1000 years. 1000 years is lot to change now. Within 1000 years, there will be many changes, isn't it? So we will be studying about all these changes that happened in these 1000 years in this textbook. First of all, let us understand two new terms, cartography and cartographer. Cartography is the art of making maps and cartographer is a person who makes maps. Do you get me? Cartography is the art of making maps and cartographer is a person who makes maps. With these concepts, shall we proceed with the chapter? If you look at the textbook, you can see two maps given in the first page and second page respectively. And this is the first map. It was drawn by an Arab geographer Al-Idrisi in the year 1154 Common Era. And what do you see in the map? What did he draw on the map? He had drawn the whole world and this is the section, this is a part of that map. In this map, you can see the section of South India. Have you seen the map of South India? And does it resemble like South India? This is the section of South India drawn by Arab geographer Al-Idrisi in the year 1154. Now let us look at another map, map 2, and it was drawn by a French cartographer. Remember, cartographer means a person who draws or who makes map. So this map 2 was drawn by a French cartographer in the year 1720 Common Era. And in this map also, he drew a section of South India. A section of South India is shown in this map. Does it resemble like South India? What do you think? See, both maps are of the same area but both are different, isn't it? Map 1 is inverted. If you look at the first map, it is inverted. The upside is down and the downside is up. South India is drawn at the upside. In fact, South India is at the down part. But he drew it inverted. Al-Idrisi drew it inverted in 1154. And map 2 was made nearly 600 years later and it is more accurate. The map 2 was used by European sailors and merchants. And what do you understand by this? The second map was drawn by a French cartographer in 1720s, nearly 600 years later. And the map 2 or the second map is almost the same map that we have now. It's almost perfect. And what do you understand from this? Science of cartography or the science of making maps changed over a period of 600 years. The science of cartography changed very much over a period of 600 years. So historians should be sensitive to the historical background. What do you understand by this? See, both maps, map 1 and map 2 are of the same area, but both are different because both were drawn at different periods of time. One was drawn in 1154 and the second one was drawn in 1720s. Do you get me? By the span of time, technology also changes and everything develops. So, when we study history, so historians should be sensitive to the historical background means when we study history, we have to be sensitive to the historical background. If we have to study history, we should understand the context. We should understand the situation. If we understand the situation or if we understand the context only, we can get complete idea about the history. Do you get me? With the passage of time, words, languages also change. New terminologies come and old terminologies are deleted or avoided. Do you get me? With time, meanings also change. The language that we speak now will have a different meaning in the future. And the language that we speak now had a different meaning in the past. So everything changes. New terminologies replace old terminologies. With time, meanings of the languages that we speak also change. Shall we see some examples? Let us take the word Hindustan. Minhaj-i-Siraj, a Persian chronicler. Minhaj-i-Siraj was a writer in Persian language. Minhaj-i-Siraj used the word Hindustan in the 13th century to name the areas of Punjab, Haryana and the lands between Ganga and Yamuna. He used the word Hindustan in a political sense. That means he used the word Hindustan to name the lands of Delhi Sultan. And see, one more thing, in the word used by Minhaj-i-Siraj, that is Hindustan, in that word or in that term, South India was not included. The Mughal Emperor Babur is a Mughal emperor, Mughal king. Babur used the term Hindustan in the 16th century. Babur used it to describe the geography, the fauna and the culture of the inhabitants of the subcontinent. See, our land, our nation, India is a subcontinent. That means it is in the Indian Ocean and it is a continent, like a continent. India is a subcontinent. India is not a continent, but India is a subcontinent. And the Mughal Emperor Babur used the word Hindustan in the 16th century to describe the geography, the animals, and the culture of the inhabitants of the subcontinent. When Babur used the word Hindustan, it had no political sense. But when the word Hindustan was used by Minhaj-i-Siraj, he meant it in political sense. Minhaj-i-Siraj used the word Hindustan in political sense, but Babur used it in no political sense. But today, Hindustan means India, the modern nation state. So, in the current period, Hindustan means India. If we say Hindustan, or if I say I am a Hindustani, it means that I am living in India or I am an Indian. So Hindustan means India now, the modern nation state India. So the same word Hindustan had different meanings. When it was used by Minhaj-i-Siraj, it had a different meaning. When it was used by Babur, it had another meaning. And the word Hindustan has now a different meaning. Do you get me? 3 meanings for the same word. Let us see another example. The word foreigner. Today the word foreigner means a non-Indian. If a Pakistani comes here, we call him foreigner. Or if a person from America comes here, we call him a foreigner. So today foreigner means a non-Indian. One who is not an Indian is a foreigner. But in the past it was not like this. Then it meant anyone from other villages or places. If someone comes from another village or another place to my village or to my place, I call him a foreigner. He is a foreigner to me. So anyone from another village or another place is a foreigner to me. So the word foreigner had two different meanings in the same context. Do you get me? The word foreigner is the same, but it had two different meanings in two different periods. So historians should be careful again. Why? Because the language or the word that we read from the books or the word that we see anywhere will have different meanings or would have different meanings in the past. It will have different meanings in the future, but we have to remember that those words had different meanings in the past. So when we study history, so historians should be careful means when we study history, we have to be careful. We have to understand the proper context and the proper situation. We have to understand the meanings of the words because the words meanings changes over time. So we have to get the proper meaning, then only we can understand history. So we have to be careful when we study history. Until now I was saying about the way we study history, but now let us see how we study history. Historians and their sources. If we have to study something, there should be a source, isn't it? We study social science from the textbook. Like that, if we have to study something, there should be a source. So, what is the source from which we study history? There are two types of sources, archaeological sources and written sources. Archaeological sources are coins, inscriptions, architecture, etc. Written sources are manuscripts, texts, biographies or prashastis. So, from these archaeological sources and written sources, we can study history. If we study the coins, inscriptions, architecture of the past, we can understand the past. Similarly, if we study the manuscripts, texts, biographies or prashastis, we can study the past or we can understand the past. When we study the period from 700 to 1750 Common Era, one thing is to be noted. Paper became popular during that period. Why? Because in the past there was no paper, but during this time, between 700 to 1750, paper became popular. Paper was cheap, paper was available, so paper became popular. What is the use of paper? We can write. So historians or the persons used to record everything by writing in a paper. And these things were stored in archives. Archives is the place where manuscripts or written sources are stored. So from archives we can get the materials and we can study about the past. Another thing to note when we study the period from 700 to 1750 Common Era is that there was no printing press then. Because printing press is a modern invention. At the time there was no printing press. So scribes copied manuscripts by hand. Who is a scribe? The person that you see in the picture is a scribe. Scribe is a person who copies, who writes something by looking at another source. So scribes copied manuscripts by hand, by writing. There is difficulty in copying now. As you know, for the exams or for class notes, you will have copied your friends' notebooks. And what is the difficulty? Sometimes you may not understand the handwriting of your friend. Sometimes you may understand. But when you cannot understand the handwriting of your friend, you may make changes. You may make changes in what you write. Do you get me? So if you make changes, there will be change in the data. The meaning will be changing. Do you get me? Like that, when scribes were copying manuscripts, sometimes they may not understand the meaning or the words, and so they used to make changes, and these changes made differences in the meaning. So when we study history, this is another difficulty. There can be changes by time also, because time, by the passage of time, changes will be made. The 14th century chronicler Ziauddin Bairani wrote, one book in 1356 and he revised it then in 1358. He wrote the first book in 1356 and the second one in 1358. At the difference of 2 years, he wrote 2 books, but the second book was different from the first book. Both had the same meaning, but some meanings were different. So time can also make changes, because by the passage of time, there will be differences in the language we speak, in the way we behave. Do you get me? When we study the period from 700 to 1750, another thing to note is that new social and political groups existed during that time. Several changes happened between 700 to 1750. So it was hard for historians to study. Because if changes are made, it will be hard to study. Do you get me? The changes are new technologies like the Persian wheel in irrigation, the spinning wheel in weaving, and the firearms in combat. These things are new technologies. These new technologies arrived in the land of India. Similarly, new food and beverages like potatoes, corn, chilies, tea, and coffee also came to India. These new technologies and new food plus beverages were brought by the foreigners who came to India. The foreigners not only brought new technologies and new food items, they also made cultural exchange. They brought new ideas also. Because if we mingle or if we interact with another person, by the passage of time we will have certain changes. We will learn new languages, we will learn new ideas, and we will learn new customs. Like that, so many changes had happened at that time, because so many foreigners came to India, because India was very rich during that time. So many foreigners came to India, and with the interaction of the foreigners, new technologies, new food and beverages, also new ideas came to India. So it was a period of economic, political, social and cultural changes. There were so many changes in our economy, polity, social and in our culture. The period from 700 to 1750 Common Era was also a period of great social mobility. What is social mobility? We move to various places now, we move to various societies. That is social mobility. During that period from 700 to 1750 Common Era, great social mobility was happening, because people were wandering or people were going here and there in search of good or better opportunities, better wealth. And during that time, many groups became important. Rajputs is one of those groups. Rajputs became important. Rajputs were not only rulers and chieftains, but also soldiers and commanders. Marathas, Sikhs, Jats, Ahams and Kayasthas were other groups which became politically important. So that was a period of social mobility, and so many groups like Rajputs, Marathas, Kayasthas, etc. These groups became important, politically and socially important. During the period from 700 to 1750 Common Era, forests were cleared and agriculture was extended. So those who lived in the forest, that is the forest dwellers, migrated to another places. Peasants means farmers. Peasants emerged and taxation started during that time. Peasants began to cultivate or began to start agriculture, and with the growing of agriculture, trade became popular. There was trade and the exchange of goods, and gradually there were rich peasants and poor peasants. These rich peasants became important, and these poor peasants had to pay tax. These poor farmers had to pay taxes to the rich peasants. People were differentiated into jadis and subcastes based on their occupation and background. Like we have divisions in our society on the basis of religion, during that time there was division between the people on the basis of their wealth and cultural background. That division was called jadis or subcastes. People were divided into jadis and subcastes based on their occupation and background. Each jadi had their own rules and regulations watched over by Jadi Panchayat. Like we have Grama Sabha, during that time Jadi had Jadi Panchayat, which was consisting of the elders. This Jadi Panchayat watched over all the people. This Jadi Panchayat controlled everyone. Every Jadi had their own rules and regulations, and everyone in a Jadi had to obey the rules and regulations of that Jadi. During the period from 700 to 1750 Common Era, there were also various empires on various regions. We get information from Prashastis. Prashastis are the books praising various kings. So, by reading various Prashastis, we can get information about various empires or kingdoms. There were large states like Cholas, Tughlaqs and Mughals, and there were conflicts between all these states. According to a Prashasti, Delhi Sultan Ghiyasuddin Babur was the ruler of a vast empire that stretched from Bengal in the east to Ghazni in Afghanistan in the west and included all of South India. So, according to a Prashasti, Delhi Sultan Ghiyasuddin Babur was a great emperor. There were so many empires during that time. Mughal Empire was one of the most important empire among them. Mughal Empire was very important. When the Mughal Empire declined in the 18th century, it led to the re-emergence of regional states. See, Mughal Empire was a wide and vast empire, and when Mughal Empire declined, or when Mughal Empire was no more, so many regional states came into being. All regions were influenced culturally and economically by the rule. What does it mean? The regions throughout India were ruled by various kings. All these kings had influenced the regions they ruled. So these regions had changes influenced by the culture of the ruler. This is a map given in the textbook. If you look at the map, you can see the names of various kingdoms and dynasties. These were the various empires who ruled over various regions in India. The period from 700 to 1750 Common Era also witnessed certain changes in religions. There were changes in old and existing religions, and new religions were brought to the land of India. Major changes happened within a span of 1000 years in religions. During that time, collective belief was common. Everyone had a personal perspective or vision about the God, but during that time, collective belief was common. And the religion Hinduism had many changes. Some major changes happened during that span of 1000 years. Those changes include worship of new deities or new gods, the construction of temples by royalty or by kings, and the growing importance of Brahmanas because of their knowledge in Sanskrit text. During that time, the Brahmanas were widely accepted because Brahmanas had knowledge in Sanskrit text. During that time, a new religion or a new concept, that is Bhakti emerged. What is Bhakti? Bhakti is the concept of a loving personal deity that devotees could reach without the aid of priests or elaborate rituals. What does it mean? Bhakti is a new concept or a new religion, and according to that religion, there is a loving personal God that devotees can reach without the help of priests or various rituals. Anyone can reach the God according to the concept of Bhakti. During that time, the religion or the concept of Bhakti also emerged. It also developed. During that span of 1000 years, new religions appeared in India. The merchants and migrants who came from other countries to India brought the teachings of the Holy Quran to India. Many rulers were patrons of Islam and the ulama. Ulama means learned theologians and jurists. So many rulers at that time were followers. Patrons means followers. Many rulers were followers of Islam religion and the ulamas. And listen, there is division in Hinduism. Like that, there was division in Islam religion also. Those divisions are Shia Muslims and Sunni Muslims. There were the Shia Muslims who believed that the Prophet Muhammad's son-in-law Ali was the legitimate leader of the Muslim community. And there were Sunni Muslims who accepted the authority of the early leaders, Khalifas of the community and the succeeding Khalifas. Listen, within the Islamic religion there were two divisions. The first one was Shia Muslims and the second one was Sunni Muslims. And what was the difference? These Shia Muslims believed that the Prophet Muhammad's son-in-law Ali was the leader of the Muslim community. But Sunni Muslims believed that Khalifa is the leader of the Muslim community. That was the difference. Thinking about time and historical periods. So within a span of many years or by the passage of time, there will be many periods in history. So when we divide time or by the passage of time, we can divide history into various divisions. With time, society, economy, culture, ideas and beliefs also change. Time is divided into periods of similar characteristics. Listen, by the passage of time, time is passing, and by the passage of time, there will be change in everything. So, according to the passage of time and on the basis of similar features or similar characteristics, history is divided into various periods. Let us see them. In the mid-19th century, British historians divided the history of India into three periods. The first period is Hindu period, second one is Muslim period, and the third one is British period. The division was entirely or only based on the religion of the rulers. On the basis of the religion of various rulers who ruled India, the division was made. The period of India was divided into three on the basis of religion. Only religion was considered. This supported only religious changes and neglected other developments. Do you get me? Because the division was only based on religion, so only religion was considered. There were other changes also, but those changes were neglected or those changes were not considered. So India is divided into three divisions, or India has three periods. The first one is Hindu period, ruled by Hindu rulers. Second one is Muslim period, ruled by Muslim rulers. And the third one is British period, ruled by British. So this is the first chapter all about. In the 6th standard, you had studied Our Past 1, which is the first edition of this book. And in that book, you studied about ancient history. Ancient history means old history. In that book, you studied about early societies. You studied about hunter-gatherers, early farmers, people living in towns and villages, and early empires and kingdoms. So in the 6th standard, you covered ancient history. But in the 7th standard, by the book Our Past 2, we will be learning medieval history. In this book or in medieval history, we will be learning about the spread of peasant societies, the rise of regional and imperial state formations, the development of Hinduism and Islam as major religions, and the arrival of European trading companies. So we will study up to the arrival of the Europeans. After the arrival of Europeans, it is the modern history. We will not be covering modern history this year. So we will be learning up to the arrival of Europeans in this textbook. This is the first chapter all about. All of you read the textbook and try to understand it. This is an introductory chapter. The first chapter is an introduction to the complete textbook. Let me tell you one thing beforehand. History is a dry subject. There is nothing interesting because history already happened. There is nothing happening. But if we need to study our history, we have to study the history textbook. Then only we can get an idea. Anyway, all of you stay home, stay safe. We can see you in the next class. Thank you.